Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. Is that better? Good evening. We are continuing our reading of the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, sometimes called Sri Ramakrishna's Apostle to the South, south of India, that is. And we are in his lecture called The Finite and Infinite in Man. So we are beginning with the third paragraph. Why do we hate death so much?
Why do we hate death so much? Because it is an unnatural condition for us to die. But if it is true that our natural condition is eternal, then we have no need to fear death. What is this phenomenon of death? Just a moment ago, a dead man was carried by. He was lying there motionless. Those hands will not work anymore. Those legs will not work anymore. And those eyes that only a few hours before were seeing are now blind. What strange phenomenon is this? Death means going out of one house to go to a better house, leaving an inhabitable dwelling to find a habitable one. As Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, as you throw away an old suit of clothes and take a new and better one, so the soul throws away an old, worn-out body to take a new and better one. Death is just this, nothing more. It is death only to the body. The soul never dies.
Yes, of course, that is one of the mysteries of our existence, is what is the difference between life and death, a living body and a dead body. Once the person's dead, you can still see that some of the cells are active, some of the biological processes are continuing in the body, not the whole body, but individual cells are still, in some sense, producing some sort of activity. There was a funny cartoon a long time ago. There were two people sitting in a Western, like probably a saloon, and they were sitting across from each other at a table, and they just had a duel. One of them was slumped over on the table, and the other one was holding a smoking gun, and the caption said, "The quick and the dead." Quick is often referred to people that are alive, so that was a little pun there. So that is definitely one of the mysteries. And of course, we have these phenomenon where people are declared dead. The brain activity seems to be gone. The heart's not pumping anymore. And then somehow the doctors, or through some miracle intervention, the body comes back to life again. And oftentimes people will report some sort of peculiar near-death experience, as it's often called, where they felt they were not in their body anymore. So they obviously is not the body and the mind. They is the Atman, the spirit, the soul within. And so this idea of leaving this body behind is what he's getting at here. So, all right, let's continue.
Now another question comes up. If the soul is thus eternal by nature, will it be limited in extension? This is a very important point, for even if it is unlimited by time, may it not be limited by space? We've been reading of atoms in our books on chemistry. The term atom is used throughout this lecture in the sense of the ultimate particle of matter. From these we have learnt that an atom is a thing which is beginningless and endless. So we know that a thing which is infinitesimally small in magnitude may be eternal. Is the soul like that? No, it is not possible that that which is unlimited by time should be limited by space. That which is eternal must be infinite. That which exists throughout eternity cannot be limited by space. That which is eternal must be infinite. That which exists through eternity cannot be limited by space, for that which is limited must have to undergo change. Something which is limited is not all-powerful, and therefore must be subject to one who is all-powerful. It must then be governed by that all-powerful being and be made to change according to his will. But that which is eternal cannot change, since change means death. So if you are eternal, you must also be infinite and all-powerful in order to keep your sameness. A millionaire may have enormous wealth, but if there is one richer than he cannot be sure of keeping what he has. If therefore he wants to keep up the sameness of his wealth, he must be infinitely rich. Then his fortune can never be lost or damaged. For whatever you deduct from infinity, infinity will remain. And whatever you may add to infinity, infinity will still be the same. Therefore, if you are to exist throughout eternity, you cannot be limited in extension. If you are eternal, you must be infinite. Bhagavan Sri Krishna says that which is eternal must pervade all space.
All right, so now he's going to be talking from ancient chemistry. I have a vague recollection that he might have been a chemistry major. I can't remember. But anyway, his chemistry books were pretty old, and they did not have any of our modern physics in it. And so there was this earlier concept that the atom was indivisible. And now, of course, we know that the atom is made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and that there are various models that split it up further into quarks and so forth. Those are basically models. Nobody's got a bottle of quarks sitting around, but they do have evidence of them in cloud chambers and that sort of thing, that some sort of entity exists with certain properties for fleeting moments of a second. But anyway, he'll be referring to atoms all through quite a bit of this lecture, referring to this ultimate smallness, but we can just take it more symbolically as some sort of ultimate smallness. But it's interesting, you see this, where he starts out, that it's kind of assumed that death is an unnatural condition. And it's because living organisms find themselves here in the state of Maya. And in the state of Maya, we are deluded into thinking that the manifest universe is all there is. And yet, deep inside, all living organisms are going to have the sense that they are eternal, because they really are. They're really one with the infinite, undivided, and unchanging. And so there's this drive within all living organisms to exist forever. And they don't want to die because they think that they're not existing after that. They don't realize they are existing. So that's what really drives this whole universe of living things. And everything wants to reproduce. Why? Because that means a part of them is still existing in their progeny. And that's why people are fascinated by having lots of kids and descendants and being remembered, and we remember our ancestors, and we connect with our ancestors, we identify with our ancestral heritage and all of this sort of stuff. It makes us feel like we somehow are connected to this infinitely long chain of beings. And as one of the characters in Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado once said his family pride was immeasurable because he had traced his ancestry back to a primordial atomic globule. That's tracing it back quite a ways, of course, and theoretically we should be able to. And when you do DNA analysis, you find that indeed all living organisms have a lot of the same biological chemistry. The biochemistry of the living cell has the same kind of mechanisms all the way down. You don't find some living organisms with some other kind of DNA and some other kind of RNA and some other kind of mitochondria. It's the same kind of stuff going through the whole thing. So all living organisms really are interconnected and related in that way. So this is part of that mystery of why we think that death is an unnatural condition, because we really are infinite. But seeking the infinite in the world is always going to be frustrating. You have to seek it in your true identity with the Spirit. All right, so we may have to correct a little of his physics as we go along, but we'll continue here.
We'll give you another example. There is the hypothesis at present that the atom is the smallest thing we know, that it is the final particle, like the geometrical point, which according to its definition has no part and no magnitude. If it has any part, it is divisible. And out of the one, we can make two. Out of two, four, and so on. But an atom, we are told, is indivisible, the last and smallest manifestation of matter. This, however, is merely an hypothesis. If it has no part, no magnitude, it has no existence. Out of no magnitude, how can all these magnitudes, great and small, which we find in the universe, come into existence? How out of no parts can parts come into being? As an hypothesis, this may be very good, but is not verified in fact. An atom must have magnitude, however minute, in order that these big magnitudes may come out of it. And out of it have come the Earth, the solar system, the whole universe. But if it has magnitude, then I can take the knife of my mind and divide it into two, and that again into four, and I can go on, thus dividing it throughout eternity, and still there will remain something to cut. There's always something left. It is plain that one cannot destroy matter. And yet, something is destroyed.
Now, of course, we know that now that the atoms are made up of electrons and protons and neutrons, and the interesting fact is that those are not really particles in the sense that we would think of them as being like billiard balls or golf balls or peas or something, very tiny bits of matter. They're not like that at all. The electron is just the infinitude is seen as small. There's nothing there but an electrical charge. It's just an electrical charge that we foolishly think is small, and that gives it energy, and the fact that we see it as having energy then gives it mass. And the proton's got the same problem, although it's much more complicated because it's tied into the separation of all the matter in the universe that wants to fall together by gravity. So it's wound up by gravity and electricity, and so it's a lot heavier than the electron. But both of them, you really can't say that you could split it up. You can't split up an illusion. If the electron is simply an illusory particle made up of mistaking the infinite for the finite, you can't divide that into two parts. So that's the difficulty there. If this is an apparitional universe, you can't divide the apparition up that way. So, yeah, he makes this interesting point that if it actually has some sort of magnitude, then you would think that you could cut it up. But of course, he didn't have the advantage of quantum mechanics and relativity theory and all those kind of things. So we will just have to put up with his analogies for now. Okay.
In the atom, therefore, we find two things, one destructible, the other indestructible. What is the destructible side? The form side. By form, we mean that which is large or small, or which being small may become smaller, or being big may become bigger. That is something which changes. But although the form is constantly changing, existence is there always, and this is the indestructible side. The changeful or destructible side is the form side, and the deathless or indestructible side is the existence side. The form side is always necessarily formful, but the existence side, is it too formful? It is also formful. It must be destructible and changeable.
If it is, yeah.
If it is also formful, it must be destructible and changeable. For forms can always be made larger or smaller. But since it battles every attempt to destroy it, it must be formless.
Yeah, so he's just trying to demonstrate that matter, we know that matter and energy can't be created or destroyed. They can be converted into various forms, but there's an indestructible element in the basic idea of the matter-energy complex, you could say, that Einstein put together into one thing. And that if you think of it as having a form, then you can think of it as occupying space. But if its true nature has a formless nature to it. Again, going back to the electron, we tend to think of it as a little particle with a particular radius, but that's really just a model. There isn't any real reality to that. It's simply a model that makes us understand what's going on inside of our atoms here, which are mostly empty space. All right, so let's continue.
Then the question arises, how can anything exist that has not a form, since everything we see has a form? The table is square with 4 legs of a certain height and dimension. That bench, again, has another form and size, and so with everything we see. Can there be, then, a formless existence? I've just pointed out to you that form can never be made formless. But if this formless existence is eternally formless, what kind of existence can that be? What is formless existence? Formless existence is an infinite existence. The definition of form is that which is bounded on all sides by lines. Forceful existence means limited existence. Formless existence means limitless existence. The finite is always surrounded by something bigger, and that again by something still bigger, until we reach that, than which there is nothing larger. And what is that? Infinity. So we shall have to go to that infinite something before we can stop. Existence and finiteness are inseparably connected according to our ordinary senses. We only know existence that is finite. It is not possible for the finite to exist if it has not an infinite existence as a background. For instance, we are in this room. The room is in the theological high school. This theological high school is in Madras. Madras is in India. India is in Asia. Asia's on the Earth. The Earth is in the solar system. The solar system is the universe, and the universe. Where is that? The universe is in God, and God is infinite. Thus, the background of our existence here is infinity, and only because infinity is there. Is it possible for this finite to exist? Hence, formless existence is infinite existence. But infinity can never be divided. We cannot cut it with a knife. And because it is indivisible, it is always one and the same.
And again, of course, in those days, they only knew about the solar system in our particular galaxy. They didn't know anything about other galaxies. So now the solar system seems tiny. It's certainly tiny compared with the galaxy, and the galaxy is only one of billions of galaxies. So even our galaxy seems rather finite compared to the entire observable universe. So we are indeed, as far as a form goes, quite infinitesimal practically. And I'm not quite sure what he's meaning by the infinite cannot be divided, because in Maya, that's exactly what we're seeing, is the infinite divided all up. But in its ultimate formless state, I suppose you could say, it can't be divided up because it's infinite. All right.
Every material particle is both formful and formless. Because it is formful, it admits of all change. Because it is formless, it admits of no change. It is evident then, the material particle that goes by the name of atom is not infinitesimally small. It is in reality infinite. But where does that infinite reside? What I see is the formful. So it is not there. Then does it exist in space? Space is limited. The idea of space is based on the idea of here and there. That is, to get the idea of space, I must be here, and the other must be there. And that which lies between is space. If, moreover, space comes into existence after the previous existence of two entities, then it is a third existence, and it must be limited. For each of these entities limits the other. Hence, space cannot be limitless. It must be limited. Formless existence, therefore, cannot be in space, but space exists outside me. So formless existence cannot exist outside me.
It's an interesting argument. So anyway, of course, the space does arise from the illusion. If you are going to see things in Maya, then you're going to see them in space and time with causation. And in space, time, and causation, you will see various things in space and time. And they will cause things to happen among themselves. And so then you end up with Newtonian physics. But if you're not seeing things within Maya, then you've gone beyond space and time. And you're not in space and time, and you are one with the infinite. The one with the infinite, the undivided, and the unchanging. So if you perceive yourself as a subject perceiving objects, then you're going to be seeing things in space and time. And they have to go together. All this stuff has to go together. As he mentions here, space depends on different objects. And then it depends on you thinking of yourself as being in one part of space and the object being in some other part of space. So all of these things go together. And as we've mentioned before, space and time are like a pair of opposites. We see things away from us in space and backward in time. You don't see anything now because light has a finite speed to it, and it takes a little bit of time for us to perceive an object out there in space. And so we see things out there in space away from us by the trick of seeing them backward in time. Now, the length of time to see things that are rather close to us is so minute that it's not noticeable. But that, in fact, is the reality, and it's becoming more obvious because of our probing of space and even sending people up to the space station or to the moon. That starts to become obvious. And then for the astronomers sitting in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and monitoring the spacecraft that have gone out to Saturn and Uranus and Pluto and beyond, it becomes painfully obvious because once you get to beyond Pluto, you're talking in terms of a couple of hours for the message to get to your spacecraft and for their messages to get back to you. And so it becomes, you can't tell it to make a turn and expect it to make a turn now. It's not going to even hear you for a couple of hours. So all of that has to be taken into account. That's the problem, of course, of sending probes to Mars. You can send last-minute adjustments, but last minute is kind of a euphemism for the fact that it's going to take more like 40 minutes for the message to get there. So you're going to have to do it at least 40 minutes ahead of time or the spacecraft is going to ignore you. So that's the peculiarity of this world of Maya that we live in. Okay, let's go on.
Time, again, is based on the idea of before and after. We can only know time by a succession of thoughts in the mind, by something that has come before and something that has followed after. Whenever our thought becomes perfectly fixed on one object, we lose account of time. Therefore, time is formful. But we are considering formless existence, so we see that it must be beyond time as well as space, and hence beyond creation, for creation rests on time and space. Now, all of these are outside me, so formless or infinite existence must be inside me. What is inside me? Myself. I alone am there. There is none to limit me. Time is inside the mind. Space is inside the body. Without body, no space is possible. And without mind, no time is possible. For mind is the basis of time and body, or basis of time, and body is the basis of space. But I am beyond both mind and body. This formless existence also, because it is beyond time and space, must be beyond mind and body, and therefore beyond the universe.
Which basically means beyond Maya. Your true self is beyond Maya. It's one with Brahman. And that's his whole argument here. And so he's just trying to convince us that we are one with Brahman. We are not this body and mind complex. It's limited by space and time. That's his whole argument here. So that we can heartily accept. All right, let's read another paragraph. How much? Got quite a bit here. Okay.
This formless existence, which I have found out in the atom, because it cannot be localized in time, because it cannot be localized in space, because it cannot be localized in the universe, must be localized in me, in my consciousness. Therefore, in me must be found that infinite eternal existence. I am indestructible by nature, If I try to destroy myself, there must be that part of me which destroys still remaining. And if I destroy that, still there will be that part for the destroyer can never be destroyed. I am therefore limitless by my nature, so I must be infinite. And if there cannot be two infinites, I must be one with that infinite in the atom. And as infinity cannot be unconscious, I must be infinitely conscious. It is because we are now only finitely conscious that we do not know all about a thing. We see this table, we're conscious of its size and shape, but we do not know what may be inside it. But if we are infinitely conscious, we must know all about it. Hence, if I'm infinitely conscious, I must be all-knowing. And if I am all-knowing, I must be all-powerful, since weakness is based on ignorance. The moment we extricate ourselves from this network of formful existence, that very moment, we realize that we are all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal, and infinite.
Again, people that have near-death experiences have a glimpse of this idea. They feel that they are not limited by space and time. Their whole life tends to often flash before their eyes within an instant, not laid out in time, but all together at once. There was a graffiti that says, "Time is what prevents everything from happening at once." But in these mystical experiences and near-death experiences, there's this feeling that everything has happened at once. So they haven't been united with Brahman in a near-death experience, but they've shed some of the layers of Maya to the point where they are experiencing some of those kinds of components that are where one is one with Brahman and not confined by the restrictions of Maya. And you have the same thing that the mystics tell you. They will also say that everything is made of consciousness, and there's an ineffable oneness, and everything is interconnected. And so all of these ideas are experienced in various spiritual states and in extraordinary experiences like near-death experiences, and to some extent in lucid dreams. Some people will have lucid dreams where they experience a kind of an infinite freedom where they're not confined by time and space, and they seem to be able to control all things. Okay, well, let's continue here.
You may ask, how is it possible for me to forego my blissful, all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal, infinite nature and identify myself with this finite being who is born and who dies, who is full of fears and anxieties? I've already given the answer. Because you have been thinking unnaturally about yourself. It's because for ages and ages, you've been identifying yourself with the body, that you have been thinking so poorly of yourself. There's a Spanish proverb, "He who lives with dogs will begin to howl." According to your association, will you grow up to manhood? Because of bad habit, you've been holding all these false thoughts about yourself. The struggle against bad habit, against these false ideas, is known as practical religion. It cannot be in any way theoretical. A man may say, "I am eternal, perfect, infinite," but if he has not realized it, his words will mean nothing. When you say, "I am all-knowing," and know it, then you become it.
There are those stories where the queen takes all the little children that are born to her and continually tell them that they are one with Brahman. They are the infinite, undivided, unchanging reality, that not the body and not the mind, and they grow up and renounce the kingdom and go off to become sages. So that's an example of being brought up in an environment that does not teach you that you are confined by the body and the mind. So, of course, that can be applied in any kind of situation, even less exalted conditions. You can, if your parents and teachers convince you that you can achieve all sorts of good things in the world, then you will more likely be able to do that. Your mindset will be set to the fact that you will be a good achiever. It's interesting, my math teacher wanted to know why people got good at math, and so she asked people, especially the girls, and because in those days the women weren't encouraged to be math before that, they weren't encouraged to be mathematicians or scientists, and they were trying to encourage more women to go into those fields. So she asked one girl why she was good at math, and she said, because my second grade teacher told me so. And so she just assumed she was. And so she went on and she was very good at math. So the power of positive thinking here, you see. And so if we can remind ourselves constantly that we are one with Brahman, that will eventually have an effect. And of course, it seems as though being embodied in a living organism, that our genetic programming is such that we are convinced that we have to survive as a body and a mind. The genetic program is for survival of the organism and for the genetic programming to be carried on. As we mentioned, people are very proud of all their progeny and so forth, and feel that they're somehow existing in their progeny. So this is what you have to fight against as a spiritual aspirant, is to fight against your genetic programming, that you need to have a lot of kids, and that you're somehow this body and mind and your genes, and that you're identifying with your genetic makeup and all that sort of stuff. You need to identify with your spiritual nature. So you have to fight against your genetic programming to think otherwise. Because your genetic program, as we said, is designed for survival. It's designed for you to recognize what's good for the organism and what's bad for the organism, what's going to allow you to live longer and longer, and what's not going to cause your early demise. It's not going to, things that out there in the world that aren't going to poison you or bite you or eat you. You want to avoid those things. And so that's your genetic programming talking. Now, of course, to be a spiritual aspirant, you have to survive long enough to get your spiritual practices done. So that part of that genetic programming is still useful, but you have to recognize it for what it is. Okay.
Practical religion is that which enables you to wage an incessant war against your unnatural way of thinking. The idea that you're Mr. So-and-so, that you're short or tall, dark or fair, happy or miserable, is all false. You are nameless and formless, birthless and deathless, eternally blissful and free from all miseries. You've made a great jump out of your natural condition into an unnatural condition. And that is why you are so confused. You have so absolutely forgotten your real nature and so identified yourself with your apparent nature that you are thinking yourself just the opposite of what you really are. And the only way to remedy this is by renunciation of your false nature, by giving up all these false ideas. This landed property, you must think, does not belong to me. This body even is not mine. I'm beyond body and mind, beyond time and space, beyond birth and death, all perfect, all full, all good. No anxiety can ever come to me. No misery can ever come to me. No disease or death can ever touch me. I am there where no fear has access. where no pain has access, where no anxiety can enter. And I'm in that place where I'm infinitely happy, infinitely secure, and infinitely perfect. No name can be given to me. I'm not a man, not a god, not a Brahmin, not rich or poor. Nothing can qualify me. I am without limitation and quality.
Sort of echoes of Christian Science, and yet Christian Science tended to focus on the health of the body, but also to a spiritual essence too. But of course, many people can experience healing simply by remembering that they are pure and perfect and so forth. So there's a great reality to that. Let's see, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, so in the path of bhakti, of course, you can still realize that you have a body that you need to take care of. But rather than thinking that you are the body, think of it as something you take care of, because it's a temporary temple of the divine. You are one with the divine. And so this body is a temporary temple of the divine. And just like any other building, it's not going to last forever. The one we're in isn't going to last forever. We have temples that have lasted for hundreds and maybe a couple thousand of years, but none of them are going to last forever. And but we take care of them while they're existing. And so we take care of the body as a temple of the divine, and that's the attitude of the bhakta. So it's not a complete denial of the body, but it's incorporating this idea that you're inhabiting a body, and that you have a body, and that the body has a purpose. Being an embodied soul allows you to do spiritual practice, and you're able to do spiritual practices so that you can realize your true nature. So this is, we have to keep all of these different attitudes in mind. All right, we just have, is this a short paragraph? Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's try it.
This is what is called realization, salvation, onlyness. Sooner or later, you must realize your infinite nature. If you realize it in this life, then you will escape the bondage of finite existence. If you do not realize it in this life, then innumerable times you will have to be born. Weakness will not do. Truth cannot be attained by a weak man. Throw away all these false notions that you are tall or short, fair or dark, man or woman. When you sleep, do you remember that you are large or small, a man or a woman? No, at that time you are calm, peaceful, self-existent. That which you realize involuntarily, to learn to realize it voluntarily.
Yeah, you know, with all this analysis too, we must remember that there's a certain divinity which permeates all of creation. And I'm reminded of that song in Hans Christian Andersen. I don't know whether it was unique to that show or whether it was just used in it, but inchworm, measuring the marigold. Think you'd stop to see how beautiful it is. You see, so if we've done a lot of analysis today, but let's don't forget to stop to try to see the beauty of the infinite, undivided, unchanging Brahman existence that's manifesting within this world. It manifests as good and evil, but there's a lot of beauty there as well. So we have to try to remember that along the way. All right, we're going to close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace. Did I give the wrong chant and the wrong translation? I think I did. I gave one chant and gave the other translation. Did I? Did it come out all right? I don't know.
Give me